Welcome to this edition of the Disciple Making Leaders podcast. I am Mike Keaton, your host, part of the Impact team here, and I am joined again with Pastor Ken Adams, pastor of Crossroads Church and founder of Impact Ministries, and we get to do what we love to do, Ken, and that is disciple making, talk about it, share the message of the mission, and so we're going to talk today a little bit about multiplication.
Yeah.
But first, we probably want to invite our viewers to the Disciple Making Summit that's coming up in January.
Yeah.
Actually, really quick, so we need to talk about that a little quick, just for a quick moment.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I love doing these podcasts. We try to do it once a month just to try to keep helping people have some great thoughts, insights, principles about how do you lead a church to being a disciple-making church. And so we've got an event coming up in January that I think is going to be fantastic. It's been a long time in coming. We call it the Disciple-Making Church Summit. And so we're going to do a whole weekend, January 29th and 30th. We've got some great keynote speakers coming in, and we also have some breakout sessions that are going to be done on Saturday. So it begins with a pre-conference on a Friday the 29th with sort of the principles of the disciple-making church that Jesus actually used thousands of years ago. So it works for anybody in any church. It's not necessarily driven by curriculum or a particular process. It's just the life of Christ and how he went about making disciples. And then that evening we kick it off with the summit, and we'll have a great lineup of speakers. And so we just want to invite everybody that's checking out Impact Ministries and Impact Discipleship. We'll invite you to go to impactdisciples.com/events and get signed up for it as soon as you can. Bring a team of people with you. It's going to be held at our Sharpsburg location, which is right here in the Coweta County area. And so we'd love for as many people to be there as possible.
Yeah, we're really excited about that. I can't wait for that, and we really want you to be there and join us. So I want you to go to that and check that out. So as we think about what we want to talk about today, and really we want to start a new series here for our next couple of times together, and really just talk about this idea of multiplying disciples.
Yeah.
And kind of unpack that a little bit and just kind of explain some different aspects of that. And Ken, I remember the first time I ever heard the concept of multiplication discipleship. And I just fell in love with that idea, and it's just probably maybe not one of the easiest things to understand, but it's not all that difficult either.
Yeah.
So we just want to unpack that a little bit today, and really what we want to focus on today is like, well, okay, what does it mean to multiply disciples? So let's talk about the what a little bit today.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it really does tie into our summit, because the summit is going to be really focusing on how to live a life of multiplying. And Mike, I'm with you, man. I spent I don't know how many years of my life I grew up in a church where I never, ever even heard of the concept of what it meant to be a multiplying disciple. In fact, I didn't even have much influence on what it meant to be a disciple, to be honest with you, much less turning around and reproducing other disciples. And so as I began to learn and grow, and as I began to lead a local church, I'm just reminded over and over again that the mission that Jesus gave the church was really clear. And that is, he told us to go and to make disciples of all nations. He did that right after the resurrection. He gathered his disciples on a mountainside in Galilee. And in Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20, Jesus made it very, very clear what we were supposed to be doing until he came back. And that mission literally is, and has not changed in 2,000 years, is to go and make disciples of all nations. And so my hunch is that we might be clear on what the mission is, but I'm not so clear on that we're so clear on how we accomplish that, and that is by multiplication. So Jesus wanted us to make disciples that made disciples. Mike, we talk about this a lot, but really, if you kind of want to try to really unpack what is multiplication, it begins by understanding that there's two ways for us to make disciples of all nations, either by addition or by multiplication. And so which one do you think is going to work best?
Well, certainly multiplication.
Absolutely. Because the truth is that if we're just trying to make disciples by addition, then we're not gonna make disciples of all nations. We're not even gonna come close by just adding disciples. But if we can figure out and we can understand how to multiply disciples, then the potential for that is incredible.
And the need there is incredible. Because if we just do addition, then the church, which we're probably already seeing somewhat, it will always be behind in terms of even just population growth. We can't even keep up.
We can't.
There's no way we can accomplish the mission.
That's right.
So we have to do
multiplication,
disciple making.
That's exactly right. And I even hear this sometimes, Mike. I hear pastors that are really, really committed to discipleship who just think that if we just making disciples, then it doesn't really matter if the church is growing or not, as long as we're helping people grow. Well, that's not true at all, because the truth is that if we're making disciples that are multiplying more disciples, guess what? The church will grow. I heard somebody say it like this. They said, if you make a disciple or make disciples, that's addition. But if you make disciples that make disciples, that's multiplication.
Yeah, that's a great distinction.
It really is.
Yeah.
In fact, let me say it again, because I don't know that a lot of people get it. So if I help lead you to Christ and teach you how to grow in Christ, and you become a disciple, so that's addition. But if I help you to become a disciple, and then you turn around in a year or so and you help somebody else to become a disciple, and then in a couple of years they become, and I reproduce that process.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Now, all of a sudden, guess what?
It's exponential.
It's exponential. And we really start to see that begins, it might start slow,
right,
but that begins a movement. And eventually, that movement will expand and that movement will grow and has the potential to literally impact the world.
Absolutely. And really, the only way we're really going to accomplish this mission that the Lord's given us. So,
that's exactly right.
So that's good. So I think, when we think about that, it's like, okay, all right, so we can see the difference, the distinction, addition, multiplication. I think an obvious question is, well, then what's the answer? What do we do, and how do we go about? Let's help point some folks in the right direction here. What do we do? How do we go about it?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and obviously, here's what we know: is that becoming a movement of multiplying disciples is not going to happen by accident.
Right, or automatic.
It's not automatic, man. It's not automatic. If it were automatic and if it were going to happen, then every church everywhere would become a movement of multiplying disciples, and every Christian would have a whole legacy of multiplying disciples, which you and I both know that's not happening.
That is not the case.
Is that, in fact, you can probably, I said this for years until actually I got to Crossroads, is that I could count on one hand the number of Christians I knew that had multiple generations of disciples in their life. Mm-hmm. Mm. Now, that's a sad commentary
I think it's
on
more
the
the
state
norm.
of the church. It is the norm. It is the norm. In fact, just think about this. How many people could you identify right now that have made disciples, that those disciples have turned around and made more disciples? I bet you most of the people who are watching our podcast today, most of those people would have a very hard time being able to identify even 5 people that were doing the very thing that Jesus came to do 2,000 years ago.
That's such a great question. Look, convicting as well.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is.
So,
Convicts me, man, sure.
So we got to move forward with it. We got
That's
to be
right.
intentional about it, and let's get busy and get after it.
That's exactly right.
So what do we need to do?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are really practical things that we could do. The first thing is that, quite honestly, we just need as many disciples as possible to start prioritizing the priority of multiplying disciples. I mean, what we need is we just need I hate to say it this way, but we really just need a disciple-making revival. I mean, what we need is that we just need believers, and we need as many people who are already disciples to catch a vision for multiplying more disciples.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many disciples that I know that have just become comfortable and have not reproduced, it's another great word, not reproduced what they have learned through somebody else. And you can continue to grow and reproduce other disciples at the same time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's a great distinction.
It helps, right?
Yeah, because you think about maturity and moving into adulthood. It's about reproducing yourself, and we talk about that in the context of this mission that the Lord's given us. We must reproduce.
Yeah, and I would even go a step further and say that if a person is not yet at a point where they can reproduce more disciples because they don't feel like that they have been fully trained yet, then the first thing you do is you commit to being a disciple.
Right.
Commit yourself to a disciple-making process. Spend a year or two learning what it means to be a fully trained disciple that looks and acts like Jesus. And then as a result of that, then make a commitment to say, I'm going to spend the rest of my life reproducing disciples. And then the second thing that I think we need to do is that we need to see, first of all, as many disciples, start multiplying disciples as possible, and we need to see as many churches as possible become disciple-making churches. So if you've got churches that are becoming disciple-making churches that are reproducing or that are developing disciples, that are disciple-making, multiplying disciples, then the church gets back to becoming a movement, which is the way Jesus started the movement to begin with 2,000 years ago.
And we could actually maybe make a dent in that population growth issue and the church actually fulfilling the mission that Jesus gave us to do.
You know, that's so true. And can you imagine this, Mike? Think about this. So there isn't a better concept anywhere in the world, in history for that matter, better than the local church. I mean, literally, what Jesus wanted is Jesus wanted to have little local bodies of believers all around the globe that were making disciples, that make disciples, and then before you know it, we have put a dent in the population, and we have made disciples of all nations. I believe that if Jesus would never ask us to do something that we weren't able to do. He would never have said, make disciples of all nations if it weren't possible to be done.
Exactly.
And so I think the problem is we're just going about it the wrong way. So you know, we can actually help churches by just teaching them the things that we've learned.
Yeah.
And we would not dare say that our church is a movement of multiplying disciples. But here's what we would say, is that we are swinging at it. We are swinging at it, and we are more committed today than we ever have in the 31-year history of our church. We are more committed than ever to trying to understand and apply what it means to be a church that is a movement of multiplying disciples.
That's
so Impact Ministries exist to help people do that. And so I've got a couple of resources that we've used here at our church. One is a resource we call the Disciple Making Challenge. And we really just have been living this out in our church. It's really kind of a concept of how to get a disciple-making movement started. And this is a free resource. All you got to do is go to impactdisciples.com and download it. It'll get you, give you a free little e-version of this, and it'll help you to do that. And then also, we wrote a little resource. I wrote one called The Power of Multiplication. And so you can order one of these from impactdisciples.com, walk through it, work through it with your team. Great little resource to help you kind of understand really what is involved in becoming a disciple-making church.
Love it. So you definitely want to go to impactdisciples.com for these resources. We, as Ken said, we don't have it figured out. We are doing our best to fulfill the mission the Lord gave us. And that's why we're here to do this with you, and we're thankful that you have joined us today. And so we want to see this movement of multiplication take place, and anything that we can do to help that happen, well, we're here to help. So thanks for tuning in this time, Ken. As always, it's a pleasure, and don't forget those free resources and Disciple Making Summit. We'll see you there.